Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The first thing Cal Brenner saw through the classroom window was the flashing red and blue. Sirens. Multiple units. Tires screeching onto school pavement like it was a hostage crisis. He stood perfectly still, mop in hand, staring down at the second-grade hallway floor he had just finished cleaning. Calvin Brenner. A voice shouted from the intercom. Put down any tools and exit the building with your hands where we can see them. Every teacher in the hallway froze. Someone screamed behind a closed door. A kid dropped a juice box and burst into tears. Cal blinked. Once. He stepped slowly toward the double doors, hands raised. His janitor keys jingled on his belt. His posture was calm, too calm. The officers waiting outside had their guns drawn. One of them shoved him against the bricks before he could even speak. You are under arrest for domestic battery and aggravated assault, the officer snapped, yanking Cal's hands behind his back. Do not resist. I am not, Cal said flatly. You are not what? The deputy growled. Resisting. Camera phones clicked. Parents watched from their cars. And standing just behind the police line, fake tears streaking perfectly down her cheeks, was Renee. She looked heartbroken, convincing, almost trembling. Almost. Cal's jaw locked, but he said nothing, just looked at her once. And Renee? She dropped her gaze. The cuffs tightened. Someone muttered, "Sick bastard," under their breath. He was shoved into the back of the cruiser, silence wrapping around him like a weighted blanket. The truth? He could have stopped this before it ever started. But then again, why would he? Why stop a storm that had not finished tearing through the liars who built it? What kind of man lets himself be arrested without even flinching? Wait, if this story gave you chills or made you think twice about trust, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button to support the channel, and subscribe if you never want to miss another jaw-dropping tale. We drop new stories every week that'll leave you speechless. To everyone who's already subscribed, sending you heartfelt love and thanks. Join the family, because here, every story hits different. Now, let's dive back into the story. 12 hours earlier, Renee stood in front of the master bathroom mirror, dabbing at her cheek with a sponge soaked in purple-toned makeup. The bruising had to look real, fresh, painful, but not overdone. She glanced over her shoulder. The door was closed. The tile floor was perfectly clean. That would change soon. She opened a small zip bag on the counter and pulled out a wine bottle, already cracked at the neck. Carefully, she wrapped it in a hand towel and smashed it against the porcelain sink. The sound was muffled, controlled. She winced as a tiny sliver nicked her thumb. A drop of real blood hit the floor. Perfect, she whispered. Next came the phone. She pressed record. Then panic mode. I am scared, she sobbed into the camera. He hit me again. Please. I do not know what to do anymore. I think he is going to kill me. She hit stop. Watched the clip. Cried again, but this time with a little smile in the corner of her mouth. Then she dropped to her knees and began smearing the wine and blood mixture onto the floor, careful to drag her own nails across the tile for realism. She pressed a fist into her eye. Enough to swell it slightly. Enough to pass for trauma. Her phone buzzed. Trent Maddox, everything set? I will take care of it. She texted back, tonight. It ends tonight. Renee walked into the bedroom and looked around. Cal's clothes were neatly folded on the chair. His boots by the bed. She kicked them aside. You should have left quietly, she muttered. But no, you had to keep watching. And deep down, some part of her knew. Cal never stopped watching. They put Cal in holding overnight. No charges filed yet, just a processing delay. But the real sentence was already handed down, public opinion. He sat alone on a metal bench, elbows on knees, eyes locked on a cracked tile in the wall. This was not the worst place he had been. Not by a long shot. Your wife says you hit her, the officer said during intake. She has pictures, videos, friends who say they saw bruises before. I know, Cal replied. You admitting it? No, you sound awfully calm. I mop floors for a living, Cal said, lifting his gaze. People never notice the janitor. You would be surprised what I see. The officer paused, unsettled, then left. Back in the cell, Cal closed his eyes. Just for a second. Not to rest, to rewind. He had seen the signs. The late-night texts. The fake business trips. The shared photos Renee forgot to delete from her cloud storage. He had traced the name Trent Maddox long before the man ever showed up with cuffs. But instead of exploding, Cal had gone still. Because rage burns out. But patience is lethal. He had been planning for weeks, maybe months. Every document copied, every overheard conversation recorded, every lie archived. When the time came, they would not just fall, they would collapse under the weight of every secret they ever thought was safe. The officer returned. You are being released. No bail. Cal stood. No surprise. He did not ask why. Outside, the air was cool. His truck was gone. The city quiet. He walked, step by step, past shadows, past memory. One thought stuck in his mind. She thinks this is the worst thing she has ever done. She is wrong. Trent Maddox adjusted his belt and reached for the badge on his nightstand. His uniform shirt was still half-buttoned when Renee walked into the room, tossing him a coffee she had not made herself. Enjoy your freedom, hero, she said. He smirked and took a sip. Did he put up a fight? She asked, leaning against the doorframe in her silk robe. Not even a word, Trent said. Like I told you, he is all discipline and no emotion. One of those still water runs deep types. Creepy, really. Renee stared into her coffee like it had answers. He is not going to stay quiet forever. Let me worry about him, Trent replied. You have bigger problems. If he gets a decent lawyer, your little bruise parade might fall apart. He is not getting a lawyer, she said flatly. He is stubborn. He will try to clear his name with logic and facts. That never works. Courts love emotion. Trent smiled, but something behind his eyes shifted. You sure there is nothing left in his name? House, bank accounts, car title. Everything is transferred or locked down, she said. He did not even notice. Trent stood, slipping on his holster. You are playing with fire, Renee. You had better pray your janitor does not turn into a firefighter. She laughed once, dry and sharp. But neither of them knew. Cal was not coming to extinguish the fire. He was coming to burn the whole structure down. The motel room smelled like sweat and cheap air freshener. Renee sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through her email with one hand and sipping wine with the other. The room was paid for in cash. Always was. Trent paced, glancing out the window every few seconds. You need to delete those backups. Anything with his name on it. I already did, Renee replied. No, I mean deep delete. Metadata, cloud, everything. She frowned. Why are you acting so nervous? Trent turned. Because you are not just accusing some loser. You are accusing a man who vanished for 6 months in 2007 and came back with scars he never explained. You think he was just sweeping floors his whole life. I do not care if he was a ninja, she snapped. He is out. I am in control now. Trent looked at her like she was a liability. You do not understand. This guy, he has a military past. Something dark. You said he had nightmares, right? That he would wake up standing in the hallway with his fists clenched. That was years ago. People like that do not forget how to hurt people. They just get better at hiding it. Renee stood, her robe falling slightly off one shoulder. You are supposed to protect me, remember? Trent sighed. I protect people who do not make me disposable. You screw this up, you are on your own. She stared at him. You want out. He stared back. I want insurance. She poured the last of the wine into her glass and smiled. Well, she said, then I guess we both better make sure Cal Brenner never gets back up. Cal returned to find the locks changed. His key did not fit the front door. No note. No warning. Just silence. He checked the side door. Locked. The garage? Padlocked from inside. She had cut him off completely. Back at the curb, Cal looked down at the street. His truck, the one registered in both their names, was gone. Neighbors peeked through blinds. He gave them nothing to gossip about, just turned and walked away. 2 hours later, at the credit union, the teller gave him a forced smile. "I am sorry, Mr. Brenner, but your joint account was converted. It is now a business trust under her real estate license." "How is that legal?" Kel asked, not angry, just curious. "I cannot say," she replied, "but I do see a pending transfer to a brokerage firm." He nodded, walked out, and did not look back. She had taken the house, the money, the truck, but not everything. He still had what she could never see: control. Back at his tiny studio above the hardware store where he volunteered on weekends, Cal opened a hidden compartment in the floorboards. Inside, a hard drive, 2 old notebooks, and a plastic bag containing a folded sheet of paper with numbers written in pencil. Coordinates, memories, targets. He sat down, pulled out a weathered map, and marked 2 red X's. One in Tucson, the real estate office. One in a nearby rural county, where Trent's name appeared on a fraudulent land deal. He whispered one word: checkmate. Then he picked up his phone, opened a blank email draft, and typed in the first name on his quiet little list. One by one, they would fall. And the ones who helped them? They would beg to be forgotten. At 4 a.m., the school was empty except for Cal. He moved through the dark halls without turning on the overhead lights. The glow from his flashlight bounced off lockers, casting shadows that moved like ghosts behind him. His keys jingled once as he opened the IT office, then fell silent. Inside, he shut the door softly. Every night for the past 2 years, he had stayed late after shifts, not because anyone asked him to, but because it allowed him access. Not just to mop floors or replace bulbs, but to learn the patterns. Who locked their drawers? Who used what passcodes? Who was careless? Tonight, he pulled a stool to the corner server cabinet and used the tiny hex screwdriver he kept tucked in his boot to unscrew the panel. Behind it was a small junction point where he had quietly installed a data bridge months ago. It mirrored school security camera feeds to an encrypted drive he kept hidden off-site. Not for voyeurism, for insurance. He plugged in his flash drive. Footage from the night before flickered across the screen. The moment the police entered, the terrified kids, Renee watching from the distance, untouched by emotion when he was arrested. Then another file, 2 weeks earlier, showing Renee slipping into a closed classroom during off hours with Trent. Cal watched just enough to confirm. Then he deleted nothing. He copied everything. He looked around the office one last time, then shut it all down. As he locked the door behind him, the hallway echoed with the sound of a single mop bucket being wheeled back toward the janitor's closet. No one would ever remember where he had been. But when the truth came out, they would remember exactly who he was. The apartment smelled like dust and soldered wires. Cal sat at his desk, surrounded by electronics, 2 laptops, a field mic, 3 tiny SD cards labeled in black marker. He inserted one and pressed play. The audio crackled. Then voices. Renee's. "You do not have to like it, Trent. You just have to help me finish it. After that, we are both free." Trent. Free from what? The guy never even yelled at you. Are you sure you can sell this to a judge? Renee. With the bruises? The fake texts? Yes. Besides, people see what they want to see. He never smiles. Never talks. He already looks guilty. Pause. Then a sound. The rustle of clothes. Trent again. "You are dangerous, you know that?" Renee. "And you are turned on by it." Click. Cal leaned back, emotionless. This was not just adultery. It was premeditation. Manipulation. A campaign. He had wired the guest bedroom lamp 6 weeks ago, a microphone hidden inside the light switch. He had hoped he was wrong, but Renee made sure he was not. Cal opened a new folder and labeled it Proof of Collusion, Primary Layer. He dragged the files in. Every clip had timestamps. He backed them up to 2 separate locations, one physical, one cloud-based. Then he took out a sheet of paper. Names, places, keywords. Under Renee's name, he wrote, "Motivated by control. Uses charm to weaponize sympathy. Fraudulent empathy. He had learned to profile enemies back in Fallujah. He never thought he would have to use that skill here. But war was war, and some enemies did not carry guns. They carried lipstick, paperwork, and enough lies to drown a good man in silence. The courtroom was too clean, sterile, a place where truth should matter, but often did not. Cal sat alone at the defendant's table. No attorney beside him, no allies in the benches behind. Just a quiet man in a borrowed shirt, hands folded like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Brenner, are you sure you wish to represent yourself in this proceeding?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said calmly. Renee sat across the aisle, flanked by her lawyer, a smirking young man in an expensive suit who whispered into her ear before every exchange. She had dressed carefully, modest, pale blouse, no makeup on the bruises that were no longer visible. The district attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, the state recommends a no-contact order, continued temporary removal from the marital home, and an order of psychological evaluation. The accusations, as documented in the victim's sworn statements and photographic evidence, are consistent with abuse patterns." "Mr. Brenner, do you have any objection to these terms?" Cal stood slowly. His voice remained flat. "I object to being labeled a danger based on a performance." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge raised a brow. "Are you alleging the claims were fabricated?" "Yes." "Do you have evidence?" "Not for this hearing," Cal said. "But I will." The judge paused, studying him. "Your reputation suggests you are a calm, rational man, Mr. Brenner. That is why I am not locking you up today. But do not mistake that for sympathy." "I do not," he said. Outside the courtroom, Renee caught his eye. He said nothing, but his look told her everything. She had framed a man she believed was defenseless. She had no idea she had just created her own executioner. The old apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of Cal's soldering iron cooling on his workbench. He stood in front of a cracked wall panel behind his closet. Hidden beneath a layer of drywall was a thin channel where he had once run a wire, a trick he learned years ago in Kandahar when he needed to monitor movement through a bombed-out hospital being used for enemy planning. This wire did not pick up heat signatures or movement. It carried sound. Cal pulled it gently, revealing a black matchbox-sized receiver, still intact. He connected it to a tiny audio interface, then played the last 24 hours of feed. He heard rustling. Keys. Someone walking through the house he used to own. Then Renee's voice, low and sharp. "I know he is watching. I can feel it." Another voice, Trent's. "Then burn everything you think he might find." Renee snapped. "He has nothing. You said he was a janitor." Trent replied, slower now. "And I am telling you, I work narcotics. The guys who scare me are not the loud ones. They are the ones who watch. Wait. Move one piece at a time." Cal paused the playback. He walked to his table, flipped open a second folder, Real Estate Network, Stage 1. Inside, documents he had copied months ago. Forged titles. Wire transfers under shell company names. Renee's name appeared on 5 deals, all connected to Phoenix Veterans Housing Corporation, a nonprofit known for laundering stolen property deeds. Cal ran his thumb down the list. She had not just broken him. She had built her empire on the backs of people like him, men discarded after they served. This was never just about love. Now it was about justice. Late at night, under the cover of soft rain, Cal walked the perimeter of the home that used to be his. He knew every inch, every corner, every flaw in the foundation. The paint was fresh now, but the memories underneath were not. He tapped twice on the side window. No one stirred inside. He had timed this for when he knew Renee was out meeting her broker, a woman named Carly Dubois, recently listed in a shady LLC filing tied to a foreclosure bundle. He went straight to the mailbox. Inside, among the usual junk, was a white envelope with embossed lettering. "Congratulations. Pending buyer approval." He opened it carefully. It was a pre-offer letter from a bank, referencing an intent to purchase. But the title holder was Renee Brenner, sole owner, and the loan application stated the property was acquired as an inheritance. No co-owner listed. No mention of Cal. He took out his phone and opened the scanned copy of their deed, which he had saved long before the marriage started breaking. Both names. Signed. Recorded. Not rescinded. Renee had submitted forged paperwork. A quiet filing buried under real estate shell games. Cal photographed the envelope, then opened a private browser on his phone. He accessed the state property title records and submitted a fraud alert request, attaching both documents. Then he walked back toward the sidewalk. From the shadows, a voice. "You are lucky the cops were not called." Cal turned to see the neighbor, a man named Paul, older, always polite before things turned cold. "I am not here to cause trouble," Cal said quietly. Paul stared at him. "She says you hit her. She says a lot of things." Paul did not respond, just watched as Cal disappeared into the mist. By morning, that sale would be flagged, and Renee would learn that the house she stole was never hers to sell. At the school board's monthly meeting, tensions were already high. A controversial rezoning plan had drawn public attention, but few noticed the quiet janitor standing in the back, arms folded, watching. Cal was not here for politics. He was here for evidence. During the third agenda item, he slipped out and made his way to the admin wing. The staff would be gone by now. Only the district tech assistant remained, locked in his office, headphones on. Cal used his access key to enter the finance department. Inside, he moved straight to the supply closet, crouched down, and removed the false panel he had noted weeks ago. Behind it, an Ethernet splitter and a disconnected router. Strange. Out of place. He took a photo, then connected his laptop via tether to download a packet log. What he found made his pulse slow, not speed up. Transaction reports. Wire instructions. Email chains between board members discussing off-market property transfers and relocation grants for displaced families. Many of those properties bought by Renee's brokerage. He copied everything, then shut the laptop and returned to the boardroom just as applause broke out over a motion to enhance local partnerships with veteran housing initiatives. The same scam Cal had just exposed. He looked around the room. Suits. Smiles. Lying faces. One woman at the table caught his eye, the same Carly Du Bois who had just shaken hands with the superintendent. She flashed a politician's smile. Cal gave her nothing, but he knew who she was now. Another thread in the web, and he had just found the first knife to cut it loose. The old service station on Miller Street had been abandoned for years, boarded windows, rusted signage, and ivy reclaiming its brick shell. But the basement still had power. Cal descended the narrow stairs with a duffel bag over his shoulder. Inside, an encrypted laptop, 2 burner phones, and a USB drive wrapped in foil. He unwrapped it, slid it into the port, and waited. The screen lit up with file trees. He had retrieved the USB weeks ago, found it stashed in the glove box of Trent's cruiser the night Cal was cuffed. A silent swipe, unnoticed during the scuffle. Now it opened like a black box. Hundreds of emails, bank statements, metadata tags linking Trent Maddox to a series of property seizures disguised as narcotics stings. When residents were arrested, homes were claimed under forfeiture laws, then rezoned and sold to shell companies, including those tied to Renee's firm. One file stood out. Operation Silent Lease. It was a full schematic, flowcharts, false affidavits, notarized signatures. A blueprint for organized financial abuse, targeting low-income families, veterans, and elderly homeowners. Cal's eyes scanned faster. He clicked on a folder named Internal Only. Inside, a spreadsheet listing names, judges, deputies, lawyers, each with a payout column and digital signature logs. He leaned back. This was no longer about revenge. This was racketeering. He transferred the entire drive to a cloud account under an anonymous shell ID, then wiped the USB clean, broke it in half, and tossed it into the old station's furnace. Watching it burn, he said nothing, but the pressure in his chest eased for the first time in weeks. He had them. Now it was just a matter of how loud he wanted the explosion to be. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cheap pastries, but it was quiet, the kind of place where secrets got spilled because no one expected anyone to listen. Cal sat across from Miranda Royce, Renee's closest friend. Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee. She had not looked him in the eyes once. "You said it was urgent," she whispered. Cal slid a photo across the table. It showed her car parked outside the medical clinic the same day Renee staged her fake ER visit. Miranda blinked. "You followed me?" "No," Cal said. "You followed her." She looked away. "I never hit her," he said calmly. "You know that. You helped her fake a hospital record. That makes you part of it." Miranda's voice cracked. "I did not know how far she would take it. I thought it was just about the divorce. I did not know. She wanted to destroy me." Cal interrupted. "You helped her build the bomb. You do not get to pretend you did not light the fuse." Miranda clenched her jaw. "What do you want?" "I want names. Documents. Anything you helped her sign. Any photos you took. Any files she shared. Every drop of poison she spread. I want it in my hands." "And if I refuse?" Cal leaned in, voice low but sharp. "Then I will expose you with her. No threats. Just truth. You helped someone lie under oath and fake evidence. You will go down with her." Miranda's mask cracked. Tears welled. Her hands trembled harder. "I will send everything," she whispered. Cal stood. "You have 24 hours. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk. Inside that cafe, Miranda realized she was not afraid of Cal. She was afraid of what he had already uncovered. The building was cold, institutional, blue walls, bulletproof glass, the scent of coffee burned hours ago. Cal walked in wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and a hat pulled low. Nothing about him said threat. Nothing screamed revenge. That was exactly the point. He approached the window labeled Internal Affairs, Anonymous Reports. The clerk behind the glass did not even look up. He slid a plain manila envelope under the gap. Inside, a typed letter detailing misconduct by Officer Trent Maddox, a printed copy of the property seizure documents, and a QR code that linked to a secure folder hosted on a mirror server, one that could not be traced to Cal. The letter ended with one sentence. "You may ignore this, but the press will not." He walked out without a word. Back outside, he took a breath. Crisp, dry air filled his lungs. The type of air that made people forget they were in a war zone, until the first shot rang out. Cal had sent his first bullet. Now he waited for the echo. At the edge of the parking lot, he paused to watch two young officers laugh near their squad car. One of them held a paper coffee cup, the same brand Trent always drank. He memorized the badge number, then turned and disappeared into the city crowd. Every step was silent. Every move was measured. Trent thought he had cleaned up his mess. He was about to learn what it felt like when the mop bucket was turned around. The envelope came with no knock. Just a thud on the doormat of Cal's apartment. Thick, heavy, intentional. Inside, a full packet of divorce papers, motion for asset seizure, restraining order renewal, and a revised list of emotional damages. Every line screamed manipulation. She had listed his supposed emotional instability, referenced past trauma from combat, and even claimed he had once threatened to vanish and leave her afraid for her life. A lie layered in enough truth to look real. Cal flipped through the pages slowly, making no expression. But his breathing had changed. Shallow, controlled. He placed the packet on the table, then opened a drawer. Inside, a photo of the two of them from 5 years ago. She had her arm around him. Same eyes, same smile. He stared at it, then folded it in half, not out of anger, but closure. Later that night, Cal walked into the county records building, not as a visitor, as a man with keys. He had been the building's contracted night cleaner 3 years ago. The access codes had not changed. He made his way into the archives room, pulled a box marked Title Transfer Disputes. Inside, copies of title deeds Renee had filed in the last 2 years. 7 were forged. 3 used Cal's name on a silent partner clause, designed to pass background checks. 1 had a false notary. He photographed everything. This divorce was never about leaving him. It was about cleansing her trail, erasing the man who knew how she built her empire. But she had made one mistake. She forgot who taught her how to fake a signature. Renee's open house was immaculate. Wine glasses lined up perfectly, soft jazz playing, the scent of vanilla candles in every room. Her outfit professional, her smile warm. But she kept checking her phone. The buyer was supposed to arrive at 4 o'clock. Instead, she got a message from her broker. Property flagged. Title discrepancy. Pull listing immediately. Panic prickled her spine. She excused herself and rushed to the backyard. Dialed Trent. You told me this title was clean, she hissed. I used the paperwork you gave me, he replied. What did you file? I used the deed you left me. No. That was temporary. I said get it officially recorded. Her hand shook. You said you handled it. I am not your secretary, Renee. She ended the call before she screamed. Inside the house, guests began to murmur, something about the listing going offline. Renee returned, smiled through her teeth, and said there was a delay in escrow. But her mind was spinning. She checked the registry herself. There it was, fraud hold, under investigation. Cal's name had reappeared on the deed, a red-flagged entry noting potential forgery. In that moment, she realized something worse than legal trouble. She was not in control anymore. Back at her car, she slammed the door shut and stared at the steering wheel. Her hands trembled. He was supposed to be broken. He was supposed to stay quiet. What else had he done? What else was coming? She reached for her phone, but hesitated. Because if Cal had gotten to the property records, what else did he have? Cal walked into the Resilience Foundation like any other visitor. The place looked like any modern nonprofit. Potted plants, soft lighting, calming posters about healing from trauma. A woman at the desk greeted him with a smile. Are you here for group or one-on-one? Neither, Cal replied. I am here to ask a few questions. Quietly, her smile faded. We do not give out information. I am not asking for confidential records, Cal said calmly. I am asking why your director, Casey Doyle, signed 3 letters verifying abuse from my wife without ever meeting me. Her face tightened. I am sorry. That is not. Cal slid a copy of the letters across the counter. Each one on official letterhead. Each one claiming Cal Brenner had been treated at their facility and that his behavior was escalating. All lies. He pulled out a 4th sheet, a payment record. Renee had donated $5,000 to the center just 3 days before the letters were issued. The receptionist went silent. I am not here to cause trouble, Cal said, voice even. But if these documents are not retracted, I will ensure the media, the state licensing board, and every donor you have ever had seize them. The woman swallowed. Wait here. 10 minutes later, a man emerged, mid-50s, glasses, tired eyes. Casey Doyle. I should not have done it, Doyle said quietly. She was desperate. Said you were dangerous. Cal stared at him. Did you ever meet me? No, Doyle whispered. Then you will draft a statement. Now, saying you never evaluated me, never saw me, and that you cannot verify any of her claims. Casey nodded slowly. By the end of the day, Cal had that statement. By the next, it had been mailed to Renee's lawyer, the court, and 3 journalists. This was no longer a fight over betrayal. It was a purge of every lie she had ever weaponized. The parking lot behind Carson's bar was reserved for off-duty officers. No cameras, no body cams. Just the kind of place men like Trent Maddox made deals they could never admit to. Cal waited in the shadows, sitting in his car across the street, watching as Trent stepped out of his black Tahoe. At 11:38 p.m., a man in a city planning jacket walked out the back door with a briefcase. They did not talk long, maybe 3 minutes, but the exchange was clear. A file folder, a handshake, a promise. Cal hit record on his DSLR lens camera, then took 3 silent shots from his low angle. Next, he synced the phone call. He had used a sniffer to mirror Trent's Bluetooth, not to listen in live, but to record when it synced with specific numbers. A call connected the moment the handshake ended. It was Renee. I told you I would fix it, Trent said on the call. You just worry about the next house. I cannot keep faking offers, she snapped. If one more buyer asks about the title, I am done. You should be done already, Trent muttered. You said this would be clean. And you said your husband was weak. There was silence. Then, he is not weak, Trent. He is watching everything. The line cut. Cal sat back. Even Trent was nervous now. That was good. Fear made people reckless. And when people got reckless, they started leaving trails. Cal pulled out his phone, opened the secure server, and dropped the footage and audio into a folder labeled Maddox_compromise_01. Then he typed one line into his notes app. The badge will break next. Kyla Moore's inbox lit up at 3:15 a.m. No subject, no sender, just a link. She hovered, skeptical. But something about it, the precision of it, made her click. What she found made her stop breathing. Evidence of forged court documents. Secret recordings. A detailed map connecting a sheriff's deputy, a real estate firm, a fake rehab center, and multiple evictions. All tied to one name, Renee Brenner. She was not new to corruption. She had seen enough as a journalist to know when something was a vendetta and when something was a full-blown operation. She clicked reply. Who are you? The answer came 2 minutes later. Just someone they underestimated. Attached was a zip folder, verified documents, legal case files, bank transfers, and a note. Release it only when I say. This is not just a story. It is a takedown. Kyla blinked. This was not a leak. This was a controlled detonation. She created a draft article, labeled the folder, Silent Janitor, Phase 1. Meanwhile, Cal stood on a rooftop 2 blocks from the sheriff's department, binoculars in hand, watching Trent leave the station with a tense expression and a USB drive in his coat. That drive? A clone Cal had replaced during the officer's routine drop the night before. The real one was already duplicated and indexed, now held in the hands of someone who could destroy them all with a single upload. Cal watched Trent disappear down the street. You planted the seeds, he whispered. Now watch what grows. Renee's morning started with a phone call from her assistant, breathless and panicked. Your name is trending. Renee jolted upright. What? Twitter? Facebook? Some blog posted a piece titled, The Realtor, the Deputy, and the Fake Rehab Empire. Your name is all over it. Renee rushed to her laptop. The site loaded with painful speed. There it was, her face, cropped from a networking event, next to headlines about real estate fraud, manufactured abuse claims, and corrupted court evidence. She scrolled faster. Each paragraph hit like a punch. She had been careful, so careful. But this was not just a leak. This was a story constructed with intention, backed by documents she thought were long buried. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. You always liked being the center of attention, Cal's voice said, quiet and sharp. Her stomach flipped. You think this makes you the hero? She hissed. No, he replied. Heroes stop fires. I just lit one. You have no idea what you are doing. I think I do. You see, I used to fight people who hid behind power. You? You are just the civilian version. Cal, everything you used to climb, I will burn. The rehab scam. The court lies. Your badge boyfriend. One by one. Then silence. Click. She stared at the phone like it had poisoned her. The screen still showed her reflection, confident once, now pale. For the first time, Renee understood something terrifying. Cal had not snapped. He had planned. And now? Now she was not ahead anymore. She was prey. The courtroom was colder than usual, not by temperature, but by energy. Renee stood alone, dressed in a conservative gray suit, hair tied back, minimal makeup. Her usual lawyer, Kyle Roth, was nowhere to be found. She looked around nervously. The bailiff called her name. Ms. Brenner. She nodded. Yes, my attorney should be. Court begins now, the judge said flatly. You may represent yourself or request continuance. But if you delay again, sanctions will be applied. Renee swallowed. I will proceed. She turned and sat down at the table, facing an empty seat across from her. Cal's. He was not there either. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Brenner submitted a pre-recorded statement and evidence packet. I reviewed it this morning. Renee blinked. Wait. What? The judge pulled out a file. Included a notarized statement from the director of the rehab center confirming your claims were false, forensic records of forged property deeds, and transcripts of phone recordings implicating both you and Deputy Maddox. The room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. That is not accurate. That evidence is already verified, the judge said. Furthermore, Internal Affairs has opened an investigation into Officer Maddox's involvement. Renee's knees went weak beneath the desk. She reached for her water glass, but her hands were shaking. The judge continued. As for the divorce, given the fraudulent actions submitted in bad faith, this court recognizes Mr. Brenner's original co-ownership of all assets. And no, she burst. He is lying. You cannot believe. Sit down, the judge snapped. You weaponized the legal system. That stops now. Outside, the reporters waited. And for the first time, Renee had nothing rehearsed to say. She walked past the cameras without a word, and the whispers followed her all the way to the parking lot. At a safe house in the desert outskirts of Arizona, Cal stared at a corkboard wall covered in photos, receipts, emails, and handwritten maps. Not just of Renee, not just of Trent. There were others. The twist was simple, brutal, but elegant. Renee was only the first link in a chain. Cal had discovered something bigger months ago, buried under a flagged real estate file. A pipeline of fraudulent claims used to exploit divorce cases, especially those involving veterans. It was a network, coordinated. Judges, lawyers, fake therapists, shell nonprofits, all using men like him, quiet, trauma-shadowed, isolated, as easy targets. Frame the vet, one email said. The PTSD angle makes it stick. Use emotion. Facts are second. That was the real operation. Renee had not started it. She had simply been greedy enough to participate. Cal stepped back and looked at the board. 23 names. 6 counties. 1 operating blueprint. He had connected it all. But this was no longer about just clearing his name. This was about exposing the system that fed on men like him. The forgotten, the quiet, the ones who did not fight back because they were too exhausted, too ashamed. He picked up a burner phone and called Kyla. It is bigger, he said. How big? Statewide. At least. Maybe federal. She was silent. Then, if we drop this, you know what kind of people will come after us. I do. Then why keep going? Cal stared at the wall. Because someone has to. Outside, wind kicked up dust across the desert floor. Inside, Cal began writing the next phase of the plan. And this time, Renee's fall would not be the headline. It would be just the beginning. Kyla Moore did not scare easily. She had once investigated a city council bribery ring that got her car firebombed. She had stood outside courthouses getting screamed at by defendants she exposed. But this was different. She sat in her cluttered office, documents spread across the floor. Every piece of Cal's investigation was airtight. No wild claims. No exaggeration. Just cold, clinical truth. Dates, names, amounts, signatures. She played back a voicemail Cal had sent. They do not care about headlines. They care about money. Exposure means cutting their revenue stream. That is the only way they break. Kyla leaned back. This was not just one story. This was an ecosystem of exploitation, designed to look legitimate, engineered to prey on emotional narratives, weaponizing gender, trauma, and fear. She opened her laptop, drafted the title, Operation Sympathy, How a Network of Legal Actors Exploited the Image of the Broken Man. It was bold, dangerous, but her name carried weight. She had a following, national reach. Still, something in her chest pulled tight. Not fear, responsibility. She remembered her brother, a Navy medic, destroyed by a false abuse charge in a messy divorce. He had died by suicide 6 months after his discharge. This was not just a report. It was justice, overdue. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Cal. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Drop everything. Make it loud. Kyla stared at the screen, then at the wall of evidence. Then she clicked Schedule Release. Tomorrow, the truth would not whisper. It would roar. At 9:01 a.m., Kyla Moore's article went live. Within minutes, it exploded across every platform. Screenshots of internal memos. Audio files embedded directly in the story. Charts outlining timelines, payment trails, and names, so many names. Cal watched from a motel room in Maricopa, one hand gripping his coffee, the other scanning the real-time updates on a private news monitor. Veteran exploitation ring exposed, court-backed fraud scheme tied to law enforcement, sheriff's deputy under investigation after whistleblower leak. It was not just one article. It was a coordinated press detonation. Kyla had timed it perfectly. 5 outlets. 3 verified reporters. All carrying Cal's story. And the twist? Not one of them mentioned him by name. He had given them the truth without a face. That made it more dangerous and more believable. Back in Phoenix, the first domino fell. A clerk from the family court system was photographed being escorted from his office by 2 plainclothes agents. Moments later, a district court judge filed for a personal leave of absence. And then came the warrants. Not arrests. Not yet. But legal holds. Subpoenas. Public freezing of assets. The network was being exposed from within, layer by layer. Cal stood in front of the motel mirror, staring at himself. He did not look like a hero. Just a man who refused to stay broken. Outside, 2 kids rode bikes past the lot, laughing without a care in the world. That was the point. The world should be safer for those who would never know this fight existed. And now it would be. At precisely 10:23 a.m., 4 identical manila packages arrived at 4 separate locations. The Arizona State Attorney General's office, the Internal Affairs Division of the Sheriff's Department, the Office of the Inspector General, and the national offices of a popular legal ethics watchdog. Each package was postmarked anonymously. Each contained a single USB drive. And on that drive, a clean, indexed database. Over 40 gigabytes of evidence. Full case logs. Payment schedules. Illicit notarizations. Hidden audio. The last file in each drive was titled simply, "For the ones who thought no one was watching by noon." The fallout had become uncontrollable. Media outlets began naming names. More judges were implicated. More realtors. Therapists. Deputies. Public trust collapsed like dominoes in a wind tunnel. And in the midst of it, Renee Brenner's name appeared in every story, not as the architect, but as the first in the line of predators. The headlines branded her, real estate agent key player in abuse fraud ring, silent janitor's evidence sparks statewide corruption probe. In her condo, Renee sat frozen, phone in hand, watching her career, image, and fabricated victimhood collapse in real time. Calls from clients went unanswered. Her social media was flooded with comments, some furious, others just disgusted. She tried calling Trent. No answer. She messaged her lawyer. No reply. Then came a knock. She looked through the peephole. A woman in a federal badge held up a file. "We need to talk." Renee stepped back, blood draining from her face. Because this was not about rumors anymore. It was about evidence. And she was at the center of it. Cal stood on the rooftop of an abandoned observatory, the Arizona sunrise painting the sky in molten gold and blood-orange streaks. Kyla stood beside him, watching her phone buzz like a hive. "Every news channel is leading with it," she said. "You were right. The system was never going to fix itself. It had to be cracked open." Cal nodded, quiet, focused. His eyes scanned the horizon like he was waiting for something. Or maybe someone. "They are going to come after you," Kyla said. "Not if I disappear first. You could stay. Fight this out. Be the face of it." "I was never the face," Cal replied. "That is why it worked." Silence passed between them. Then he handed her a second drive, his final copy. "This is all of it," he said. "If anything happens to me, you know what to do." Kyla nodded, accepting the weight of that trust. Below them, The city was waking up to a new reality. Dozens of officials under investigation. 3 properties seized for restitution. 3 nonprofits shut down pending fraud audits. And somewhere, in a tiny apartment downtown, Renee Brenner sat alone, blocked from every account, stripped of her title, facing criminal charges. She had tried to frame a man to build a fake empire. Now, that empire was crumbling under its own lies. Cal looked to the sun one last time, as if measuring how much of it he could still carry. Then he turned and disappeared down the stairwell, without a word. Kyla watched him go, and in her heart, she knew. He had done more than seek revenge. He had broken something ugly, so others would not have to. The lobby of the sheriff's department buzzed with tension, phones ringing, boots pounding, quiet murmurs slipping through closed doors. Then Cal Brenner walked in. No disguise, no fear. He stepped to the front desk and placed a sealed envelope in front of the receptionist. "For internal affairs," he said. "Eyes only." The officer blinked, unsure. "Name? Just tell them," Cal said, voice low. "It is from the man they thought had no voice." He turned before she could respond. Halfway to the door, a familiar voice cracked through the tension. "Brenner." Cal turned. Deputy Trent Maddox stood near the stairwell. Pale, eyes rimmed with red, his shirt wrinkled. The swagger was gone. "You think this makes you righteous?" Trent said. "You ruined careers. You dragged people down with her lies." "I exposed them," Cal replied. "She just gave me the starting line. She is facing felony charges now. Then she is finally being held accountable. You were never supposed to be this smart." Cal stared. "You were never supposed to be this sloppy." Trent stepped forward. "You are not walking out of here like some kind of hero." Cal's jaw tightened. "I am not a hero. I am the correction." And he walked out, leaving Trent standing alone in a building that no longer protected him. By noon, the envelope Cal had delivered, filled with cross-referenced memos and covert recordings, was submitted into an active IA case. And Trent? He was suspended by 3 p.m. indictment pending. It started small. A single press release from the Attorney General's office. Indictments filed an ongoing veterans exploitation case. But by afternoon, it was a flood. 6 officials, 3 court clerks, 1 deputy, and Renee Brenner. Her arrest came fast, a quiet knock, no cuffs in public. She was allowed to surrender herself. Still, it was filmed. Still, it went viral. She tried to hide her face behind sunglasses, but the reporters had already captured her broken posture, her silence. No more fake tears. No more fabricated stories. In the courtroom, the prosecutor laid it all out. Fraudulent abuse claims. Title forgery. Racketeering involvement. Perjury. Renee's lawyer barely spoke. There was no angle left. She was remanded without bail pending trial. The woman who had once smiled for housing magazine covers and community galas now sat behind bulletproof glass, waiting for a public defender. Elsewhere, Judge Halloran, one of the key names on Cal's list, was quietly escorted from chambers. Cameras did not catch it, but the leaked documents did. Dozens of rulings overturned. Entire case histories reevaluated. The system was eating itself to survive. And at the center, a man no one saw coming. A janitor. A ghost. A veteran whose silence had been mistaken for surrender. Renee's condo was emptied 2 days after her arrest. Her business accounts had been frozen. Her license revoked. Every pending deal dropped. Clients fled. Friends vanished. Even her family, once proud to parade her success story, went quiet. A single voicemail from her sister said it all. "We are embarrassed, Renee. Do not contact us." Her face flooded social media with headlines like, "Queen of Clean Image exposed as master manipulator," the irony cut deep. She had built her brand on trust, support for women, healing from toxic men. And now, she was seen as the very monster she pretended to protect people from. In her cell, she stared at the floor. No phone, no assistants, no filters. Just the quiet sound of shame pressing in like walls that would never stop tightening. At visitation, no one came. No Trent. No family. No lawyer. Only a blank envelope arrived, slid under her door by an officer. Inside, a single photo. It was her, taken 3 years ago, smiling, standing beside Cal at a charity event. And on the back, one sentence written in block letters. You never saw the real me. But I always saw the real you. She gripped the photo tightly, hands trembling. It was over. Not just her freedom. Her identity. Her illusion. Her entire world had collapsed, and no one was left beneath the rubble to save her. The camera rolled in a quiet studio with black walls and a single spotlight. Kyla Moore sat in front of the lens, poised, voice calm. She looked directly into it and said, "What you are about to hear is the story of a man you will never know by name, but who changed everything." The screen cut to a blurred silhouette. Cal's voice, steady, low, and calm, began speaking over dark background footage of courtrooms, headlines, arrest footage. No one expects the janitor to fight back. That was the point. They picked people like me because we are invisible, quiet, already broken in their eyes. He detailed how it started. The lies, the manipulation, the silence. How he had been framed, stripped, erased, and how he documented everything instead of fighting back with fists. Kyla's editing was surgical. Clips of documents, audio leaks, testimonies, drone shots of raided offices. The story built like a thriller. Then Cal said something that stopped the internet. I did not want revenge. I wanted correction. And I wanted to remind them, silence is not weakness. It is calculation. The interview dropped at 7 p.m. By 7:05, it had over 400,000 views. By midnight, 2.8 million. The comments exploded. This is like a movie. She destroyed him, and he came back with truth as a weapon. Respect to this man. Quiet power is the most dangerous kind. Cal never appeared in person, never showed his face. He did not need to. His story was bigger than his identity, and it had just become a national movement. Cal returned to the house he once owned, the one Renee tried to sell out from under him. It was empty now, silent. He walked through the back gate and stepped into the yard. The garden was overgrown. Dead branches, dry soil, weeds clawing up the stone borders. He stood still, staring at a patch near the far corner, beneath a cracked bird bath. He remembered. 3 years ago, Renee had begged him to dig it up so they could install a koi pond. He had refused. Too much work, too much cost. She was furious for days. But while planting later that spring, he had found a small box buried there, tucked under loose soil. Inside, letters. Old ones. To another man. Dated a year before their marriage. He had said nothing. Buried it again. He thought forgiveness was strength. That silence could heal things. Now he walked to the same spot, knelt, and dug with his hands. The box was still there. Water damaged. Moldy, but intact. He opened it again, same letters. Same lies. He held them for a moment, then lit a match. The flame took quickly, curling paper into ash. It was not about anger anymore. It was about release. The fire reflected in his eyes, calm, unwavering. He was not burning the past. He was letting go of it. For good. The final court hearing took only 16 minutes. Renee pled guilty to 3 counts. Fraud, perjury evidence, tampering. Her plea deal offered a reduced sentence, 5 years with parole options. She had no strength left to fight. But before the judge finalized it, she was asked if she had any words for the court. She stood, barely. Her voice cracked. I made mistakes. I was scared. I felt cornered. The courtroom remained still. Then the judge turned to Cal, seated quietly in the back row, dressed simply, hands resting on his knees. Do you wish to speak? The judge asked. Cal rose, walked slowly to the front. He did not look at Renee. He looked at the judge. I do not want vengeance. I want clarity, he said. This is not just about me. It is about every man who has been falsely accused, every woman who has been silenced by false narratives, and every system that allowed it. He turned to the audience. I forgave her once, and she used that to sharpen the next lie. He faced the judge again. There is no mercy here, only consequence. Then he sat down. The gavel fell, and Renee's fate was sealed. No cameras were allowed inside, but the transcript leaked. And when it hit the internet, the final quote from Cal went viral. She mistook quiet for weakness. Now she knows it was restraint. 2 weeks later, Cal received a plain envelope from the Arizona State Court. Inside, official clearance of all charges. Statement of record correction. Signed and sealed. No ceremony. No headlines. Just justice, delivered in ink and silence. He placed the letter in a box with only 3 other things. A photo of his father, a folded flag from his service, and the empty dog tags Renee once wore around her neck to look like the good wife. He closed the box, taped it shut, and stored it in a back closet of the cabin he now called home. A place far from Phoenix, far from whispers, far from wounds. Outside, wind moved through the trees like a lullaby. He sipped coffee on the porch, listening. No calls, no threats, no unfinished business. He was no longer running. He was no longer fighting. He had not just cleared his name. He had reclaimed his peace. The email came from a small public school principal in a forgotten Arizona county. She had seen the news, the articles, the takedowns. But what caught her attention most was a detail buried in one line of Kyla Moore's final article. The whistleblower has already donated all settlement funds to rural education reform. At first, people thought it was a PR stunt. But then checks started arriving. No names. No return address. Only a note typed on cardstock. For the kids who still believe in fairness. For the teachers who still fight for truth. Cal never attached his identity to the donations. He had chosen 5 schools, each one underfunded, each one within miles of veterans' housing districts, each one struggling. He sent money with no instructions, only trust. Desks were replaced, libraries restocked, after-school programs restored. In one photo, sent quietly by a teacher, 3 second graders held up signs that said, "Thank you for helping us dream again." Cal stared at it on his laptop. He said nothing, just saved the image into a folder labeled, Proof of Worth. A month later, Cal returned to the elementary school where it all began. Not as a janitor, just as a man passing through. He walked the empty halls during after hours, the way he used to. The floors shined like mirrors. The walls were lined with student art. It felt alive again. In the custodial closet, he found a new face, a young man with a buzz cut, wiping down a mop handle. "You knew?" Cal asked. "Yeah," the kid smiled. "Week 2. You liking it? I thought it would be boring. Turns out, you see everything from here." Cal nodded once. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single item, a silver master key, still engraved with the number that unlocked every door in the school. He handed it over. The kid looked confused. "What is this?" "A reminder," Cal said. "That power does not always come from being seen. Sometimes it comes from being invisible." Then he walked out. The sun was setting behind the school, and Cal never looked back. Deep in the mountains, at a quiet retreat center run by Veterans for Veterans, Cal met an old friend, Marcus Hale. They sat beside a fire pit, drinking black coffee as coyotes howled in the distance. "You did it," Marcus said. Whole system shook. Cal shook his head slowly. "I exposed it. Someone else will need to rebuild it." Marcus pulled out a dusty black folder, thick, aged, sealed with an army insignia. He placed it in Cal's lap. "What is this?" Cal asked. "Your Delta file. I requested it. I do not need it anymore." "I think you do," Marcus said. "To remind yourself that you were never just what she called you. Not just the guy she painted as broken." Cal opened the file. Pages of reports, commendations, photos of missions no one ever talked about. His past laid out in a quiet archive. He had buried that version of himself years ago. But now, he saw it with new eyes. Not as a ghost to outrun, but as part of the man who survived. He did not cry, but he did close the file carefully, and held it like something sacred. The years that followed were quiet, but the consequences kept spreading. Renee served her sentence, most of it in silence. No interviews. No redemption arc. She applied for parole twice, denied both times. Her name was permanently removed from the Arizona Real Estate Board. Her social accounts were ghosted. Her family, still ashamed, kept her at arm's length. Trent Maddox moved states, lost his badge, worked private security jobs no one respected. The judge who ignored Cal's first plea retired under pressure, publicly disgraced in a judicial ethics report. And the nonprofits? Investigated, audited, dissolved. But the real shift? Men like Cal started speaking. Veterans who had been silenced. Fathers who had lost custody through manipulated systems. Survivors of false allegations. They wrote blogs, held support groups, and often cited only one source for their strength. The man who never gave his name, but gave us our voice. Kyla Moore's book became a bestseller. And in one chapter, one quiet page, she wrote, "Some say karma is a wheel, but I believe karma is memory." And one man's memory changed everything. In a world driven by screens and status updates, Cal Brenner existed like a shadow. No Facebook, no Instagram, no LinkedIn. His name had never been tagged in any viral post. No one could find him. But his story? It kept echoing. Bloggers speculated. Podcasters recounted every detail of Kyla Moore's expose. Conspiracy theorists tried to attach him to special ops groups, government leaks, or even political sabotage. But no one could prove anything. Because Cal was not chasing fame. He had done what he came to do, and disappeared like smoke after a fire. He moved through cities without making ripples, stayed in cabins, rented small apartments, left no digital footprints. His phone had no apps, no photos. When he paid, he used cash. At coffee shops, when someone asked if he had heard about the guy who took down that corrupt real estate scam, Cal would just nod. Sometimes he would smile, never say a word. The myth grew, and in that myth, people found hope. A quiet man, one no one expected, had faced a system built on lies and tore it down with nothing but the truth. Not everyone needs a platform. Some people just need a plan. And Cal? He was always several steps ahead. It took weeks to clear the overgrowth. The cabin had been untouched for years, his father's old retreat in the hills near Flagstaff. The roof sagged, the porch was rotted, and the garden looked like a battlefield of vines and thorns. But Cal worked quietly, methodically. He replaced beams, sanded the floors, hung new shutters with his own hands. The silence was not loneliness, it was restoration. One morning, he stood by the back fence, staring at the garden bed where nothing had grown in years. He bent down, tilled the earth with a small hand rake, and began planting. Not flowers, not decoration. Food, tomatoes, onions, herbs, potatoes. It was not about survival. It was about grounding. Every hole he dug, every seed he planted, was a choice. A reminder that creation matters just as much as destruction. At night, he sat on the porch with a black coffee and watched the stars reappear behind the clouds. The house creaked with new life. And Cal breathed, slow and full. He had been many things: soldier, husband, target, ghost. But now, he was a builder. Again, the last box he unpacked sat untouched for weeks. It had survived 2 moves, 3 cities, and everything that had followed. Cal placed it on the kitchen table and opened it slowly. Inside, a dozen handwritten letters from Renee, sent from prison, some apologizing, some denying, some begging. She had written them during her sentence, each one a different version of herself. The victim, the manipulator, the grieving ex-wife. Cal read each letter fully, not because he needed answers, but because he needed closure. The final one ended with, "I do not know how to undo what I have done. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to hear me, even if it is too late." Cal folded them all, tied them with twine. He carried them to the fire pit behind the cabin, lit a single match, and watched as the paper blackened, curled, and disappeared. Not in anger, but in release. He did not carry her anymore. Not her lies. Not her memory. Not her version of who he was. The smoke rose, and Cal stood still, feeling lighter than he had in years. It was a Sunday morning when Kyla arrived. She parked her car at the end of the dirt trail and walked the last few steps up to the cabin. Cal was already on the porch, sipping his coffee, watching the mist slide off the mountains like smoke from an old war. She sat beside him without speaking. For a few minutes, they just watched the trees sway. Then she asked, "Do you regret it?" He thought about it. "No," he said. "I regret staying silent for so long. I regret not trusting myself sooner." She nodded. "You changed lives. You know that, right?" He gave a faint smile. "Not because I wanted to. Because I had to." She reached into her bag and handed him a hardcover book. Her book. The cover was stark black, the title in bold silver. Framed. The war they did not see coming. Inside the dedication, she had written, "To the man who taught me silence is not surrender." Cam. He ran a hand over the cover, nodded once, then set it down. Neither of them needed to say more. Not every victory ends in applause. Some end in quiet, and that is enough. Cal had trained for war. He had studied enemy tactics, survival methods, infiltration, resistance. But no one had trained him for this kind of war. The kind where your name is twisted, where your wife becomes your enemy, where courts become battlegrounds and lies become weapons. And yet, he survived. And more than that, he won. He built something out of it, exposed what others could not, brought down people who had hidden behind power and polished smiles. But the price? It was never light. At night, when the wind pressed against the walls of his cabin and the fire dimmed, he would sometimes stare at the old uniform folded in the closet. Not out of pride, out of memory. He had worn it to defend freedom. And in the end, he had used no weapon except truth. That was the lesson no one taught him. But he had learned it anyway. Renee's parole hearing came and went. Denied. Her file now carried a red stamp. High-risk fraud pattern, emotional manipulation, not eligible for early release. Her story was not one of tragedy. It was one of exposure. Injustice. Publicly, she vanished. Privately, her name became a case study, taught in legal ethics seminars, used as training material in abuse claim verifications. She had not just lost her career. She had lost her weapon, her ability to lie and be believed. And that was the true punishment. Not just the prison bars, but the silence that followed. The silence of being seen for what she truly was. And Cal? He stayed out of the news. But his impact kept living. A small legal firm started a program called the Brenner Protocol, focused on identifying false allegations and ensuring real victims and real truths were protected, not confused. Change had begun, and it started with a janitor who no one thought would fight back. The last scene was simple. Cal sat on the porch, book in hand, fire crackling just outside. The stars were out, endless, sharp, and honest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photo of himself from a long time ago. He looked younger, unscarred, a quiet man with hope still untested. Then he looked at the mirror hanging beside the door. He did not look the same, and that was okay. He had walked through hell. He had burned the lies down and planted something better in their ashes, not for revenge alone, but for justice and peace. He exhaled and whispered to himself, "She tried to erase me, and I became the one thing she could never silence." He stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and stared into the horizon. The screen faded to black. But before it closed, a final, quiet question. What would you do if someone tried to destroy your life, and no one believed you? Tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? How did this story hit you? And if this revenge tale made your pulse race, like, share, subscribe. But most of all, remember this story. We will see you in the next epic thriller. Until then, protect your truth. And take care of yourself. Fade out.